Everyone. Yeah, and this is the perfect place to be because we're going to learn so much today. I hope. Okay, so it is with great appreciation that we, the residents of Protection Island, acknowledge this land as the unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation and of their legacy throughout the island. Thanks again to Emily and Marlene for helping set up, and Roger, of course, who comes out in a cold, rainy day and sets the chairs up. Thank you, Roger. This talk is being recorded. Emily will let us know in a couple of days or so when it's available for future listening. Questions at the end, please, for Zoomers, or use the chat box and raise your hand if you need to ask a question. Mute yourselves until the end if you can. Okay, donations will go to the Parks Committee. Last week's donations of $62 went to the PI players, which will help them pay for their costumes and stuff. They don't have to pay for their scripts this year, which is nice. Kitchen inspection is still coming on February 10th, and I know that that's the Lions Club business, but I'm just telling you because we might get some fancier treats after this, but we'll see. And for those of you who were at the golf cart talk, I just wanted to mention that I have spoken to Kim twice. We still don't have the cans yet, that we're waiting for the battery cleaner and the lubricant. So, and then we can go to her place and fill up our tires. So she'll let us know as soon as that happens. And now I'm going to tell you all about Antonia, which is very interesting. Okay, Antonia Stevens, network engineer. Antonia was born in Reykjavik, Iceland, and attended the University of Reykjavik, studying computer science and business. When she was 17, she became aware that computer science was a young field with tremendous opportunity, and so she made a very bold move for a young woman her age. She incorporated her own computer company, forming interactive websites and auction sites. In the 90s, she sold her company and joined .com, a group of companies that were internet pioneers, and Antonia was asked by the company to open an office in Montreal, where she spent 2 years. Then for 10 years, she worked in the Middle East, the Balkans, and Asia for various computer startup companies, mostly in the airline and telecom fields. At this point, she felt the need to settle down and considered all the countries where she had lived and worked. She chose Canada. For the people, the quality of life, and the fact that it was a multicultural society. She spent 13 years in Toronto working for IT security and telecom companies. Then, when COVID hit, she became, as she calls it, again, a digital nomad for a few more years, working in the US and Europe. COVID settled and she returned to Canada. Because she could work remotely, she wrote a computer program. Who doesn't? To find a place for herself. She stressed in the program closeness to the ocean, closeness to the mountains, cost of living, and proximity to an international airport. Aren't we lucky the computer knew what it was doing? From her recently purchased home on TI, she makes software that controls cell phone towers and sells this to Rogers and many other companies, telecom companies. For PI, and to give us a better internet option, she has set up a new antenna in town and has 2 internet links to PI through that antenna. One here at Beacon House, and part of it's right up there in the ceiling. You'll see it, but she'll tell you all about that. In her spare time, Antonia says, in her spare time, Antonia sails and has built her own boat, I've heard. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. And is busy remodeling her home. Please welcome Antonia Stevens.
Thank you. That was a very, very warm introduction and kinder than I deserved. Just sort of on the topic or on the presentation. I'm going to start the presentation by reviewing the options that we currently have for internet, and this is all based on empirical data that I've gathered from community members. Your experience might be different. Please tell us about it. Please correct me where I'm wrong. This is, my experience and people like you. There's going to be a little bit of jargon, but I'm going to try and keep the acronyms to a minimum. Having said that, we'll get to that antenna and the setup and everything else towards the end. And then we, as a community, will need to decide on the next step. So, having said that, I'm just going to dive right in. These are your current options, as far as I know, for internet. To summarize, we have a cable from Shaw and a cable modem set up for that using a simple DOCSIS. And then we have the 4G antenna towers from the cell phone companies in town. Finally, we have satellite internet via Starlink. That is pretty much it as far as internet options go. And then finally, I'm adding one more. So we'll get into details on each one of these and sort of diagnose, the pros and cons of each one. Some jargon, just for those who aren't in the tech industry. I hope these aren't too incurable. The first ones are just megabits per second, megabytes per second, gigabits. Just sort of so you know, when somebody says megabytes or megabits, that makes a difference. Megabits is traffic in flight. So then we're measuring in bits. When we measure it storing, on the disk or somewhere else, it's always measured in bytes. Mm-hmm. To get one or the other, you multiply by 8. So you take the megabits and you divide by 8, and then you get the megabytes. Mm-hmm. Same with the gigabytes and gigabits. Mm-hmm. So whenever we're talking about network speeds, we always do in bits. So if you want to know how much time it takes to download a movie, that's 1 gigabyte. You have to multiply by 8 to get the number of gigabits.
Let's do a little song like that. Singer.
Latency and jitter, these are also important things. So if you've ever been on a Zoom call or ever been on a telecom call and you've experienced, either delay or sort of cutting out, that is latency and jitter. For those of us who predate fiber optic cables, and you remember talking to Europe over a satellite connection, you probably experienced high latency because the satellite connections typically have about 300 milliseconds. So that's about where you start noticing in a voice conversation that the other party is sort of slow to respond. Anything under 300 is getting harder and harder. In the networking world, we aim for like 10 to 40 milliseconds because nobody notices. That's our general sort of rule of thumb. Just to give you an idea of how fast that is, it takes 40 milliseconds to cross the Atlantic and back on a fiber optic. So for light, it takes 40 milliseconds to get from one side of the Atlantic to another. It also takes about 40 milliseconds to get from west coast to east coast for a ray of light. So this is sort of what we work with every day. But it's very important because this defines your usability for the real-time feeds. Not important if you're just watching a movie because you don't care whether you're getting it, from a second ago or not. You're just streaming the whole thing. But if you're having interactive things, it really does matter. And the worst thing you can have is this thing called jitter. That's where you have basically the latency vary. So all of a sudden the latency jumps up and then comes down, jumps and comes down. That's where you have the call stuttering and all those things that we really hate. The rest are more kind of just microwaves and millimeter wave and just jargon that you'll hear. Let's just move on and not worry. If you have questions about these, just come and ask me. As far as what we have for the current LTE and mobile leases. First of all the carriers advertise 5G and they yell and scream. We don't have 5G here. Not a single one of them has set up any 5G antennas. We're entirely based on 4G and LTE in this area. So just ignore all that marketing jargon. And this is sort of what I do for day-to-day stuff. Like I literally we write the software that controls these towers and does this. So I'm speaking with some authority on this topic. The speed's typically anywhere from 20 to 120 megabits per second. Under lab conditions, like when I'm working with, AT&T or someone, and we have our own cell phone tower in one phone, we can get up to like 2 gigabits. But in real world situation, no, you're never going to get above 120 at peak. The other thing to be aware of is this is shared. So the entire bandwidth of the tower is shared among every single cell phone user on the tower, or on the sector more specifically. So unlike your wired connections, which are individual connections to each household, this is shared by every user. So if 5 of you are all using the LTE network here on the island, you're going to be impacting each other. So and that's the one thing they don't talk about very often, is that because it's radio frequencies and we're all in the same sector, there's only so many devices that can talk at the same time. And then the tower has to say, you can talk, you can talk, you can talk, you can talk, and so forth. And there's also a discrepancy in the download speeds versus upload speeds. That's because most cell phone towers are tuned, where they say 80% of the time we're going to allow you to be downloading, and 20% of the time you're going to be uploading. So that's how they control the balance of download and upload. Might not, for some of us it really matters, for others not so much. If you're creating video content and uploading, you're going to really care about that. If mostly it's doing movies, you're not going to care about that. The other thing that you'll notice on mobile networks is there's higher latency. So if you're doing any of that interactive stuff, they're not as good, because the mobile towers, they're going to basically store up, let's say 40 milliseconds of data, put it all to the side, and then they're going to switch to your cell phone. And then they're going to send all the they've stored up to your cell phone. And then they're going to switch to another cell phone and say, here's your chunk that we've stored up. So instead of sending everything instantly, they're just going to put it in buckets. And then they're going to switch between this phone to that phone to that phone and send it in buckets. And the same goes for your access points that you get from Rogers or Bell or Telus here. So, let's move on from that. And let's talk about cell phone towers. So this is the Telus building on Fitzwilliam Street. And each one of these shaded areas is a sector. So cell phone tower sector. And you can see here that there's really only one sector on the Fitzwilliam Street that covers part of the island. But it only covers the southern part of the island. So there's actually no sector from them that covers the whole island, which is why you were going to get much better Telus signal on the South Island, presumably, than on the North Island. Let's move on. You can also see how they cover downtown much more, So this is really how it works. And if you look at, there's a little antenna tower on top of the building on Fitzwilliam, the Telus building. That's where they have all these antennas. And you can see that they kind of look like a vertical bar, and they're sort of almost triangular in the back. And you can actually see where they're aiming, because they're going to pick like 75, 90, 45 degrees in a sector, and they're going to aim at that. Rogers, they're on top of the coast bastion. Again, same kind of thing with sectors. Their coverage is a little better, as you can see. They have one sector that covers almost the entire island. So I would argue that most probably they have the best coverage of the island for mobile connectivity. Let's move on. Rogers also has some towers that do quite. But of course, the other thing we don't see here is the geography of the island. If you're shaded behind something, then the signal starts dropping. So, especially for the high-speed data connections. So, you might want to pick your carrier based on where your house is, etc. All of this data, by the way, is freely available online. You can go and explore all these maps and everything else and look into detail if you want to know more, or ask them. Let's move on. Freedom Mobile. They've got the same thing, a little bit on the South Island, but their coverage is not great. We'll move on from that. They're also on the coast bastion, by the way. And then Bell, they've got a special agreement with TELUS. Bell and TELUS work together so that TELUS gets access to Bell stuff on the east side of the country, and Bell gets access to TELUS stuff on the west side of the country. So they kind of collaborate a little bit there. So generally, you're going to see exactly the same coverage from both Bell and TELUS. There might be situations where you don't, but they share the same cell phone towers and infrastructure and a lot of things, and they even in more rural area they share the same antenna systems. So
there's no coverage in Bell here at all?
there is coverage. Some of it's roaming. So that's another thing is they can make the telcos can make agreements between each other, so that when you are can't use their network, you will fall back on another network. But then you will be deprioritized. So we have something called QCI parameters. So when you're not on your home network, you are going to be like you're going to get the remainder. You're going to get like the dregs of the barrel. So whenever you're traveling abroad, that's the coverage you're getting. You're getting basically whatever's left when everybody else has had their share. So some of the carriers do have those roaming agreements for specific areas. So it's not quite this, clear cut. But when it comes to like fixed wired internet, you're typically not allowed to roam. So your phone can typically roam, but the parts, like the access points, the LP things that you can buy and put on your house or something, most of them are not allowed to roam at all. Yes.
That cone or that range that covers the south end of the island, like on your previous slide,
Yeah.
is that, like, why are they prioritizing all that coverage over the water instead of aiming it a little bit more to this, fairly high population island?
In this case, they're probably trying to catch the dual point ferry. That would be my guess.
And
So
that's more important than all of that.
yes. That would be my extension for Gabriel.
So it does go, it extends that far.
Yes.
It's just the
The-
angle that's more important.
And this isn't like this data is gathered by a ton of cell phones with an app that just sort of community collected, because nobody publishes this information. This is like trade secrets from telco. Like if they would never ever share this. Yes,
Are there any cell towers on Gabriel?
there are. Yes, I think there's one. I think we'll get to this.
And on that, if they were, depending on where they located, would we be able to pick up a signal, say, I'm on the north end, on the Gabriel cell tower?
I think
Okay.
right here.
Yeah.
So that's just there's Rogers coverage.
Okay.
In here, in here.
I think you can also pick up from seashells.
Yeah. That's the signal might vary, they might have different frequencies, but yes. And there's all kinds of restrictions also. Some of these have much less bandwidth than others. So there's nuances to all of this. This is just like a very rough overview.
Seems like you're talking about seashell.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think that's way beyond typical distance for a tower, no?
And as an antenna, you have the right antenna, you can go 100 kilometers.
Oh, yeah.
It's just going to be a very, very narrow beam. So just to give you an idea, these cell phone towers typically have broadcast powers of 10 watts, maybe 20 watts. So we're talking 100 times more than your Wi-Fi access points. So they can blast quite fast, but they still all use antennas to restrict the area, to restrict the noise, everything else. And you basically build your antenna. You can either do like a point-to-point, which is a very narrow cone, think of it almost like a laser beam, or you can do like a 90 degree. So you just take like all of this 90 degrees and like 10 degrees up and down, And so they can design the systems exactly like that. So when you go and you look at the Coast Bastion or the Post building, and you look at the antennas, you can see exactly where they have these 3-point antennas that are round, complete dishes. And then when they have the sectors, which are for this up and down, like almost like pie slices. Okay, let's move on from LT to cable links. Yeah, as most of you know, we have an old shop cable link here with a DOCSIS modem. And we have an uplink over by the pub. So that little satellite dish by the pub, that's right at the top of the stairs down. That is the microwave antenna. And there's another one in town. And they basically do a point-to-point connection between the two. And everything goes to that. Everything on the cable goes to that. A couple of thoughts on this. Cable uses something called DOCSIS. That is the standard for cable modems. It is almost entirely abandoned at this point. Nobody is working on it for future things. It's basically come as far as it can go, and it's not going to be, there's going to be no further development. Everybody is moving to fiber or has moved to fiber. So whatever's there is what we're stuck with. They're not going to improve the speeds. In fact, the cables will degrade with time. As there's more water ingress into the coax, and as the coax degrades, it swings on the lines, it's just going to get a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And the same goes with the uplink from the dish shore there. That uplink is severely restricted in the amount of bandwidth. So that's a very old microwave uplink. So it has just a fixed amount of bandwidth. I figured it was probably a gigabit link. I haven't taken a spectrum analyzer there to look at it, but I think the total bandwidth that is probably about 1 gigabit. Latency is a lot better than the LTE network, so it's better for the jittery, voicey stuff, but it's not a very good permanent solution. And talking to the Shell people, or now the Rogers people, they have no plan to upgrade. They basically say there's no economic incentive for them. There's too few of us. They're not going to do anything. Whatever we have is what we're going to be stuck with, and we're just lucky that they're actually supporting it. According to them. So it's not very great. Starlink. As far as I know, there's only one resident on the island that uses Starlink, because there's very few people that have enough open sky. So only here in the south end really do you have, enough open sky to get the satellite coverage. For those of you who don't know how the Starlink system is designed, it's not like you send it up to a satellite that sends it to another satellite and they're a global network. You send it to a satellite and it sends it immediately back to the ground. Because doing interconnects on the satellites is super expensive and really hard. It's much easier to just send it back to a base station. So the entire network is just fiber optics. And then they have these base stations for Starlink. And they just send it up to the satellite, and the satellite immediately beams it down to the closest one. And in our case, that's in Vancouver. The other thing to note about the satellites is that the total capacity of the Starlink network is geographically based. How many people in your area are using the same satellites as you? And we're very close to Vancouver. And it turns out we're using exactly the same satellites as everyone in Vancouver have. So the total amount of throughput and everything else is therefore not so great. We'd actually be better off if we were further up the coast, because then we'd be sharing the satellites with less people. But yeah, typically these are the numbers that I got from the single resident that I know is using it. And she's getting 30, 40 megabits per second. So really not a great connection.
Are those geosynchronous, so it's always the actual same satellite, or do they switch as they're going around?
So if you could put something in geosynchronous orbit, you have to put it so far out that the latency goes to 300 milliseconds. That's what we had with transatlantic calls, 20, 30 years ago. The nice thing is that the satellite always stays in the same place. But it's so far out that light just takes so much time to go there and come down that it really hampers the use. So Sorry, was the question?
No, I think it's just good.
That would be embarrassing if I
I think you need to share your screen again.
Okay, there we go. Share screen. And here we go.
That's many people in Vancouver using Starlink.
Yeah. Oh, it's up in the environment, other things. There's places where you have no internet, but they're very close to
Yeah.
Vancouver.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, the other
So, satellite goes by and it's linked, and then it goes out of range, another one comes in, and there's a switch. Are there any problems caused by that switch? Like that?
No. So what made Starlink possible are antennas that are based on interference. So if you've ever seen waves travel in a pond, if you see waves coming from two directions, they merge and they turn into a separate waveform. This is really hard to do with radio waves because they're so tiny, like the frequency is so high. So we weren't able to do this up until like 5 or 10 years ago, where you have multiple small antennas in one array, and then basically for every single wave, you interfere with each other from those little antennas, and then they can make one beam that you can direct. So even if you have a flat antenna, you can direct the beam exactly where it's going. And this is all done digitally. There's no moving components, but you can really accurately beamform and send the link exactly where you want it to go. And that's what enabled all these Starlink things to happen. So you can get this Starlink antenna that's just flat and has these multiple elements in the antenna. And sort of spoiler shares, the antennas that I'm using for the uplink here, same exact thing. They're beamforming antennas. So they can do this sort of magic. So,
Quite pricey Starlink, huh?
yes. We're talking about $100 per month at least.
Plus the equipment.
Yes. Although they will give you the equipment now.
Cable is $100 a month.
Yeah. I should say there are, going back to cable, there's a rule with telecoms in Canada that both Telus and Rogers have to share their infrastructure with smaller internet service providers. So regardless of where you are in the country, if there is a link in, then smaller internet service providers are able to service you. And that's why you can go and you can buy internet from all of these smaller ISP outfits and get it delivered over the shop cable here. It's a little bit trickier because we've got this weird cable that's, different management system and everything else. But Rogers is required to give access to them to get on the network. So if there was a fiber network here, you could probably pick from 10 different internet service providers, and they'd all be using the same basic infrastructure. So that's why you can get the same connection for maybe down to, I'm going to say $35, $40 a month for a cable connection here. But you'd have to go with one of the smaller outfits.
Okay.
They use the same infrastructure all the way into probably Vancouver, and then they break it up into their own internet backbone. So what else do we have? And this is sort of where I come in and
Yeah.
there is an internet standard for internet protocol over pigeon. So now I'm going to talk about what I've been doing for the last year. So 5PSI Networks. So I started a company, and it's a BC benefit company. So it's a for-profit, but it can also have a stated goal that doesn't have to be a profit goal. So you can do things that don't make sense from a pure profit standpoint, like provide network access to an island, or something like that. So what did I need to do that? And by the way, passed 360 shares for a reason. So, what was needed to do that? Well, incorporate for one. The second one is I needed a site in Nanaimo where I could get fiber links installed. I needed the antennas there to get the signal over here because I'm not rich enough to put in a submarine cable. Over here, you got the signal over here. And all that's done. And I think now we can actually do a demo of that. Hopefully. So let's do a demo of the antenna. So we're using that access point and antenna on the outside of the building that you can look at. It should be going faster, but unfortunately the network card on my laptop doesn't go any faster than this. So the link is actually a 2 gig link, but this is the fastest my laptop can do right now. And I'll share the credentials later. This is free for as long as I'm around for anyone to use here in the library, in the community hall, and in the museum. So if you ever need a connection, if you need to download something, your internet is working, or you're working on an important project, then you have somewhere to go. So that's easy to do, and for me to provide. As far as let's see, let's go back. When you out here, we'll go to 5psi.net, because that's the domain I used. So this again belongs to all of us. This is what the antenna looks like that I have in my house, and there's a similar one in town. Sector antennas are a little bit different. And here's what if we can open that tab or not. Doesn't really matter. Anyways, so there's open links now, and it's ready to use for whoever. Next step for this is I'm gonna try and install a similar system for the pub. So anyone can use free internet at the pub, because that's another place where people could go when they need a good connection or are working. So assuming that I can get permission to install anything. Okay. So
Do we need a password or anything for that to get into that?
yes, and I will show you that in a second. Okay, next steps. So we talked about some of this. Some of this is done already. So what I want to talk about is options for people who aren't over here, who aren't in the pub, and don't have direct line of sight. Because if you have a direct line of sight, you can get one of those antennas and just put it up in your place, point it towards my antenna on the other side, which is right next to Harbour Chandler. If you're walking next to Harbour Chandler and you see a little pole on top of one of the building with a little couple of white antennas, that's our setup there. And Shift Coastal Technologies was gracious enough to allow me to install that, and instead I paid for their internet and take care of their internet connection. So that's the rental lease, and it's about $250 everything in per month. So that's what I pay for the internet uplinks, covering their internet, and the internet that I'm using for my work, and what I'm sharing here today. Of course, that can be upgraded, and we can get the bandwidth up with more people, but that's the current the burn rate.
Yeah, can you then take that antenna and split the signal into a fiber or cable or something?
Yes, and that is exactly what I want to talk about next. For those that don't have direct line of sight, I'm proposing that we form together and we take this 5psi.net company that I've created, and we look at one of 3 options to share the internet with the rest of the island. The first option is to dig a trench on the island. And I've talked to Don Huey about this, And I have a rough, very rough cost estimate for the cost of doing it. It's about, I'm gonna quote him incorrectly, but it's roughly $200 a meter. And there's about 5 kilometers of roads on that. So you can do the math on that. It's fairly expensive.
That's a big fundraiser.
I also, yeah. The thing is the fiber optics themselves, the equipment, they're cheap. Like if I can buy all the fiber optic for everything and all the equipment for $1,000, $2,000. That is very inexpensive. All the cost is in digging or in getting it to that last mile. And this is why Rogers, for example, is required to share their connections with ISPs, because the barrier of entry to that last mile is huge. Second option, I talked to Matt Eck about BC Hydro and the hydro poles. He shared with me a price list and some recommendations. It's about $100 per pole for the permit to put it on there, plus the work required. Now, the nice thing is Don is also certified to work with BC Hydro and has all the insurance, so he could probably arrange for the work to be done, put everything on the hydro poles. There's about 100 hydro poles on the island, and yeah, the cost is about $100 per hydro pole for the life of the project. The fiber is a little bit more expensive because it has to be reinforced with a steel wire, but we're still talking thousands, not tens of thousands. Yes.
Just wondering what happens if you have a tree come down across the wires. Is it easy to repair?
Yeah, it's fairly easy to repair. You need to have the right equipment. So you need to do what's called fiber splicing. Depends on how many pairs there are, but yeah, you have a little machine, and you basically have to go up or bring the cable down or go up there, and then you put individual fiber strands in, and it aligns the fibers and then polishes them and then melts them together. So you have to have a special, piece of equipment to do it, assuming that you don't have breaks on every pole. And I'll get into that in a second. So the first option there would be to run a network either on the poles or in the ground, and to run it directly into every single house. So every person would get a little fiber optic converter, converts the fiber optic signal to a regular network jack or Wi-Fi access point for whatever else.
So they did it over at Gabriel and government paid.
Yes.
Right, and
We're not being impressed.
we could get something from the government to do it on the island because nobody else is doing it.
I'll get it to it I'll get to it on the next slide, and then we can talk. The final thing is we could go with the most budget option, which would be to put a Wi-Fi access point on every single power pole. That way you don't need to run any fibers into each individual house. You don't need to do any trenches or put it along with the existing piece of hydro. It is not as reliable. Because especially if you've got a lot of leaf or foliage, and if the foliage gets wet, that is the worst thing you can do for a wireless signal. Because anything waterlogged will just reflect or be absorbed. And a lot of that's because Wi-Fi runs on exactly the same frequency as microwaves. So microwaves get absorbed into water. You eat stuff in your microwave. It's exactly the same with wireless signals. They all get absorbed by water. Yes.
That last option you're describing, you need a clear line of sight between the pole and your house.
Ideally, yes. If you're gonna have it very reliable, then ideally that you could probably get 20 to 15 megabits per second without a direct line of sight and with some foliage. But if you want any close to like a gigabit or a couple hundred megabits, then you wouldn't want much foliage. Some is okay, and the lower the frequency, the better it is, but it's not great.
Is that your third option there?
Yes. So that would.
Would that work if some customers opted for
Yes.
receiving a signal from the pole and another one might I'll pay for the trench?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we can do a mix and match of all this. And if we do, get somebody like Don to do the work, I'm sure he could do like a discount and offer options or whatever else. So yeah. And this is sort of something we need to figure out together. Finally, what you're referring to, Gabriella, connected coast. Yeah, we'll go to this slide. The BC government decided that everybody on the coast should get a fiber optic connection. And they basically got a fiber lane ship that's been working for several years now. And it's installed fiber all the way up to Haida and all the way down to Saturn. And it's to connect to rural communities. Unfortunately, we're not a rural community. We are the city of Nanaimo, and that's not covered by the Connected Coast program. And I have written to them and talked to them, and I've even offered, because they had a cable laying ship down working out here just, I don't know, half a year ago. And I connected with them and I said, hey, since you had the ship, like how much do we have to pay you to do a fiber drop to our island here? And they wouldn't even give me the time of day. So yes.
Talk to the local MLA.
No, I talked directly to the Connected Coast people. I am not.
Is it too late to talk to them, or?
They're still doing work, so it might still be possible. I think most of the work there's left is down south of here. So, but it would be a tremendous boon if we could get a fiber link from them. And they installed one on Gabriola, just right above the ferry terminal. If you do that's like 90 degrees right. There's like a little shed or a hut there. That's where they bring the cable onto the shore.
From my experience up the coast, they're rebuilding it and repairing it continually. It will never be done.
Oh, they're having
Constantly being wiped out by currents and stuff, using a very cheap cable.
Oh, okay.
And it's not practical.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, because they put it in places where there's like one house on the coast and it's not gonna work.
That's terrible. Yeah, there's a couple of things. Like if they really mean business, they would get a steel reinforced cable and they'd plow it down.
Yeah.
So, but that is way more expensive than getting the cheaper cables and just dropping them on the floor. Having said that, for somebody like us over here, you can just drop them on the ocean floor. Like unless there's somebody drops an anchor on them or there's a fishing net, then generally you're okay because we don't deal with as much. That's where we get to the next slide, which is this is something we could do in the future. This is where the existing Connected Coast fiber is. So we probably couldn't do a direct link across because that might interfere with the existing anchorages for the large freighters. So we'd have to avoid those. Yeah. But somebody with a barge and spool of underwater cable, and the cheap cable that they're using up there, I got a quote for it, and I think it's like $6,000 for the spool across. But you also need to plow it down when you get close to shore, and you need to pay the connection fees and other things. But this is totally within the reach of the community at some point.
How come is there no connection in Nanaimo that we just go into?
Yes, there is. The problem is it's not that hard to get to the shore in Nanaimo, but then you need to get the permits to dig it in and trench it into the shoreline. And then you need to have an access point there that you need to rent. And then you need to dig up all the streets to get it to a connection point as well. And so it's much cheaper to buy an extra couple of kilometers of fiber and connect to the Connected Coast, which is a community like the BC, subsidized program, than to have to plow up the Trillium Street and put it into the Palace building or something. And plus, then we'd be sort of relying on a single provider, be it Rogers or Palace or whoever owns the fiber at that location. There isn't a good place in Nanaimo where we can get connections to everyone. Most of the bigger cities like Vancouver have what's called an internet exchange, and then everybody connects there. We don't really have an internet exchange here. So there isn't like one location we have to go into. We have to pick one of the existing telecasts and go with that. So, yeah, we already talked about that. Yeah, so if you want to try the Wi-Fi here at Beaconhouse, there's a Wi-Fi network what's called 5PSI Public, and that is the password that you can use. If you all do speed test at the same time, I have the same account and possibly more locations. I'll probably install an antenna at my place. So
Nice exposure.
So I could put one of those aerials on my place.
How much are the antennas? Or the aerials?
do little
Little.
to the other side.
Mhm.
Two of those, yes. The one that I have here was $250 Canadian, delivered to my doorstep. The one that I have in my house is slightly more powerful. That one's probably $400-500. But yes, you could.
Then you
could
just use a different router, or how would you just plug her in?
Yeah, you just get your regular network plug and you plug it in and you're done. The trick is actually aligning it because these are directional, so you have to be kind of careful when you. And you have to have direct line of sight, no trees, no nothing but 60 feet.
Like on their dog.
Right on the very teeth.
Yeah.
Go up there and look.
Okay, well, I think Zoom just is the Gabriel ferry. Because that's the one thing is the Gabriel ferry actually crosses the path of the antenna here. Yeah, it's just the cabin at the top. It's
There it
like
is.
the. But when they cross.
Daytime?
And now we're back.
Yeah, there's
It
a,
was going.
there goes the ferry.
Yes.
Just have a quick.
Yeah.
The pole mounted Wi-Fi you were talking about, your third
Yeah.
option. Don't PC Hydro use Wi-Fi to connect to the meters? Because I'm pretty sure they upgraded the systems to do that, so just,
They might have their own on the post, but we can't use that.
okay, that wouldn't be
Yeah.
any interference between the two.
No. And the prices that I got are for mid-pole installation. If
Right,
you want to go top of pole, it's much more expensive.
oh, I got it, okay.
So, yeah, we wouldn't interfere or anything with that. We basically install a couple of sectors around the middle of the pole.
Okay.
Yes.
So with the option of running cables on poles, obviously every year or two, we usually get tree branches or trees falling on cables and potentially causing breakages. So when BC Hydro comes out to do their repairs, I'm assuming they wouldn't be repairing that cable at the same time. Okay, so we would have to have a plan to
Yes.
deal with that ourselves.
So, and this is sort of where it comes in. There's more than one way to skin this cat. If we do continuous fiber poles or multiple poles, then obviously we have to have the equipment to splice fibers. But if we're putting wireless access points on the poles, we might as well terminate and put a repeater on every pole. Because we're already breaking out part of the connection. So that way you could just replace the entire line from one pole to another. So you could just keep some of that line spare, and then you wouldn't have to have the fiber splicing equipment.
Okay.
I am all for this. Oh my god. Continuing it on through the company, just
So-
because it's incorporated, I don't know the business end of it.
So the company's incorporated with 360 shares, the thought being everyone who wants to be a part of this gets one share. So the company would be entirely community owned and operated, but of course we'd have to vote in a board and everything else. Right now, I'm basically the company and I own all the shares and everything else, but I'm putting this out to the community, so I'm suggesting that we form some sort of working group, a couple of people from the island, that sort of take it to the next step, because it has to be more than me, it has to be, and I'm more than happy to, train people and try and educate more people about how to run this. And ideally, to be honest, I'd love to have some of the younger teenagers or younger people on the island and give them some life skills too. Yeah.
Yes.
Because there's nothing that's saying that they can add it and make a career out of it as well.
I'll chat with my students, some of them might be interested.
Yeah. And the same with helping out the other residents with their connections. The best people to do that are other islanders, and like if younger people on the island can do that, that would be fantastic. Because there's only one of me. I don't have the time to run the whole thing myself.
So I apologize if this is not a smart question because a lot of this is going right into my head. If we all went with this kind of Wi-Fi, how does that affect if we're paying for TV cable?
I don't know how you're paying for your TV cable.
Well, but I mean, we're paying. Yes. Am I the only one who doesn't understand exactly how TV cabling works? Is
Just stream everything.
Yeah, I would suggest just dropping the cable companies because they're overcharging
You
anyways.
get everything.
So, and then you're saying that we would use TV only through
Internet, yes. Something like Crave TV if you want local broadcasts.
Yeah.
Or some people just want to use Netflix or something else. So whatever works for you.
Because I'm thinking that they could end up dropping us
Completely.
if we all.
Possibly, yeah.
Learn it for me.
But
The future.
they use the same cable, yes. And today they run everything over the same network.
That's what I wondered. Yeah.
However, having said this, the reason why Shell's here in the first place is because the city of Nanaimo forced them. So when they got permission to put in other cables, it was under the conditions that they would service the whole city. And that's the only reason why they apparently came over here. So they would probably still be bound by that.
Just to emphasize your last comment about how they had to be forced to come here. When BC Hydro put across their new undersea cable for power, I talked to them. I talked to Shaw at the time. I talked to Telus, saying this is a perfect opportunity to share costs, get some fiber across. Whoever brought the fiber would have 360 customers.
Yeah.
BC Hydro is not interested because it's their lease, their trench. They said they could partner if they want, but they'd have to pay for their own lease. The two cable companies sounded to me as though they would be happy to get rid of us. They were not interested in talking. And so we're more a thorn in their sides than.
Honestly, they just want to get rid of us. Because if you do the math and how much money they're making off us, it doesn't cover the cost of operating the.
So when you put that system in, now do you have to share it with Telus? No.
If they actually come and say we want access, then yes.
And then you don't have to, do they pay for it?
Yes, they would pay for the yeah.
Okay.
But they pay for access to the sort of base network.
So when you say they want to get rid of us, and they'd be more than happy to get rid of us. So say this gets up and running somehow and it gets really well, they all get rid of us. Can we go back if this doesn't continue? What happens?
As far as I know right now, they are obligated to provide the service here. Worst case scenario, you could always go LTE and in the future 5G. So you could always go to one of those mobile network providers because that's, but if I don't know what Rogers has planned.
Just in case they realize, hey, we don't have any more customers. Why should we do this anymore? So they're not going to do it. And then all of a sudden we're left out hanging to dry and we have no,
But I would like
what takes place in that kind of an emergency.
We need a contingency, which is why we need to make sure that we are all and we have enough people. Just Kevin first.
From my perspective, though, the whole reason why you embarked on this is that these companies aren't willing to upgrade us to today's standard. And so they don't deserve it. It's like you gotta also look at it from that.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that is from everybody's experience, and this was my experience talking to them as well. Neither Telus nor Rogers really cares about us, so I don't think that we're really at any more risk of losing internet access with Antonia's system than we would be there.
That's where I'm asking, what is this fast or gonna?
Yes, I mean, like right now, it sounds like they're bound by law to provide service out there, and that doesn't sound like it's changing anytime soon. So, if the law changes, I'm sure they would link us straight away, regardless, even if we didn't have a backup system, because we're not economical customers for them. So, I
Just-
think, I don't think we're really putting ourselves in a worse situation. I think this is almost all upside from what I can hear.
How often would we have to replace the system? In other words, how often, what's the life expectancy of all the stuff we're doing?
5 to 10 years for equipment, but the actual infrastructure like fiber, that is utility grade, so we're talking 30, 40 years. The beautiful thing about fiber optics is that you can upgrade it by just upgrading the piece of equipment at the end. There's no limit to how much you can put through the fiber itself. So that just keeps on getting up, going up and up and up and up. So you just replace the end equipment. But the actual part that goes in the ground or on the post, that is utility timelines.
I'd like to explore our relationship with the city in that regard. So the city hasn't really supported us either. And just wondering if we put in a system like that, we could claim a tax benefit.
So if it got up and running and it was really going well, would it be giving us more and better than what we have now?
So just as a general, just the little antenna that I have out here on Beacon House has more bandwidth than all of the island combined. And I've got double it at home for my connection just because I use it for work. So it doesn't take much for us to make a huge improvement over what we already have. And like I said, the current cost to me is what I'm paying out of pocket for partly self-interest, but sharing with everyone else is $250 a month. So we can start with that's just for me, but that's everyone can use that. So it's not a huge investment, it's not a huge step that we need to take, and that's already here. So the question is just how much do we want to build on top of that? And anyone with a line of sight is more than welcome to join in and use it. Just reach out to me and I'll help you set it up and order whatever you need. But it's more the rest of the island that I would putting that infrastructure in place.
So property values are gonna go way up.
So if you have a line of sight coming from there, and you put another repeater on the pole out in front of you, then you could send that signal
So
To the rest of the
to
island.
the people. So if you have a good line of sight, then you can put it, and then you could eliminate that.
And I did that this summer for testing. I covered the entire cul-de-sac up by summer. Yeah. So I just put up a Wi-Fi antenna there and covered all of that for testing, and that worked pretty good. And then I moved from the little coach house to my house now.
Yeah.
So now I don't have a good place for the antenna.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could just haul up like a loop on a tree and cable, fiber cable up the tree and then put up a couple of antennas and share that. But it wouldn't be it's better to design a whole solution for everyone, not just like ours.
It's just you right now, trying to help it. But is anything similar or whatever being used on other islanders already similar to this or the same?
Yes.
And how well is it operating and how much?
Some of the islands have, or some community fiber projects like this are quite common. They're more common in Europe than they are in North America, but there are cities that have here in North America that have developed this. And to compare the models in Europe, what the cities basically put in all the fiber when they build the cities with all the other utilities, and then they rent access to the telcos. So the telcos don't own the physical wires in the ground around the poles. That's city owned, and then they just rent either what's called dark fiber or fiber segments.
So small islanders are doing this somewhere else and it's running fairly.
Yes, there are other islands. I know there was a project down on Cethetis or I think it was South Spring as a project. I don't know if that got off the ground, but there's many communities that do this. And I've done this before. I did one in Reykjavik, Iceland, like 15 years ago. And that is currently a network of about 100,000. Well, it's a little bit larger. But yes, there are communities, Austin, Texas, another like citywide community. There's plenty of communities that do this. And they basically own the infrastructure and put it in as an investment, just like our sewage or our water. Kevin, back first, sorry.
Going back to the 360 shares, would we all buy one of the shares, or how would that work?
So my thought there is, for tax reasons, the best way to probably do it is the share will be priced for the equipment needed to terminate the connection. And that way it's an investment and not, and then it just works out better for tax purposes.
We like that.
So that was my initial thought in how to structure it. Otherwise it would just be $1 a share, whatever that, like, we figure that out.
So so you got a cost, like for using the system in order to maintain it.
No, she's not saying.
250, but right now I'm paying $250 out of pocket every month. That is the entire cost of the current system.
Yeah, just for yours, but if
Yes.
you have a system and you have going to all the other places, you gotta have a float or something that carries.
We'll need to structure something like that.
Yeah.
And then if we're gonna expand the system and or like put in a fiber optic cable over to Gabriela, we can run the system on the current uplink for a year or two and just increase the fees a little bit until we have enough money in a pool to put in whatever we need to. And one thought I had was just get like the barge. There's like the PI barge, put a fiber spool on it and spool it up. A little more complicated, but yes.
Crowd. The drawback to trenching it in is primarily cost,
Yes,
and the drawback to pole lines is
trees.
trees falling down and having to repair.
Yeah.
But I think some of the people are getting it. What are the drawbacks of the system itself, assuming there's no down lines and
Yes.
if you're all connected, like really maintenance wise, 10 years of maintenance free, or what's the continual, like, what are some of the drawbacks other
Sure.
than those?
Cost.
So the current uplink, or so let's separate the uplink versus the infrastructure itself. So putting in a fiber infrastructure on the island, and the uplink are sort of separate because we could always upgrade the uplink and get a fiber optic cable to Gabriel. The best possible connection is fiber optics all the way. The less wireless you do, the better the connection will always be. So even if we put in the power, like on lines and the fiber on the power lines or in the ground, we can always hook that up to something like Gabriela, and that would make an even better system. So that would be a good upgrade. As far as the current limitations are, the equipment I'm using is limited to about 5 gigabits per second per uplink, but we can have multiple uplinks. So we can have one uplink from, say, the pub, another uplink from Beacon House, and maybe one from my house. And then you would get the total aggregate bandwidth. And if one of the links goes down, then we're still up on the other one. The other thing is, like here, like I think the ferry might block the signal twice an hour. If there was a gigantic ship that would be so tall that it would we could always put things in the tower or figure out a way to try and get it higher up.
Airplanes and all?
You can't fly in between. But they're so quick you probably wouldn't even notice. There's another downside, which is that we're renting the site for the antenna on the other side. Maybe they change their mind or they terminate the lease there. Then we as a community would have to find another building. Of course, another thing we could do is go on to a building that's higher up. I approached the Coast Bastion and the owners of that building and checked if I could rent an antenna location for them. And they said no, they've got all the antennas they want and didn't want any more. But if somebody knows, because I think it's owned by, is it a union?
Yeah, that's the union.
Yeah. So maybe there's a way to, as a community, to figure that out, because the ideal location for wireless links on the other side would be the top of the Ghost Bastion, or on the like any of those high risk. would be ideal locations for.
The new building, the old post office building.
Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the Beacon House has had a similar system to what Antonia's recommending. But not anywhere near as powerful as the one that she's recommending. But we've had no downtime on the computer, on the network here whatsoever in 2 years. So, and it's line of sight, so it's our antennas on the outside, similar to what Antonia's recommending. The only thing is, this is nowhere near as powerful, but still, there's no maintenance cost, there's no real downtime.
Tell us.
This one is TELUS, yes, it goes to the TELUS building, but that's the one.
So once this is all installed, each one of us, each resident now has to get their own wireless router for our house and install it, and
So we need a wireless router, yes.
each one.
Yeah, that is an example of a wireless router over there. They're about $100. And for a really good one, it's about $100. For managing, like I have a utility to centrally manage the whole network because all of this is from a company called Ubiquity Networks, and Ubiquity makes equipment for exactly this sort of thing. Like they make the antenna on the outside, they make the antennas on the other side. This is their bread and butter. So this is what they do. So this is not some proprietary custom hardware or something. This is all off the shelf stuff that you can go onto their website and order and have delivered in a week. So yeah. So the
For setting it up.
the trick would be I would have to train a group of people to support and maintain it going forward. And that's where I thought like maybe we can make this into an educational opportunity for people to get some life skills.
So who's your backup right now as manager? Who's your backup?
Nobody. It's just me.
Her and these guys are a customer right now.
Yes.
With as much knowledge as you to be able to, if something should happen, that.
Absolutely.
Wait, so I have no one to tell us as far as,
Yeah.
can I use that?
If it's
To access.
yes and no, if it's like a wireless thing like this one in the corner over here,
Well,
that
doesn't
can be.
mean that, but it is similar.
Okay, then you can use the wireless access points, yes. The actual LTE device, like the one that's on the outside, no, that can't. It operates on different frequencies, so no.
Well, that would be in addition to your antenna. Okay.
But you're renting yours, aren't you?
No, I bought it.
So
The $250 per month that you pay for the signal.
Yeah.
Who are you paying? Where does the signal come from?
TELUS.
TELUS?
Yeah. I've got 2 fiber optic links from TELUS in town because that was the most affordable way that I could start this. Going forward, the best way is to actually get a leased link going straight into the Internet Exchange in Vancouver. And then there's the whole peering thing, probably Hurricane Electric or something like that would be the best choice. But yes, ideally in an ideal world, we'd have the underwater submarine cable over to Gabriel, connected coast there, and then we'd get a fiber link all the way into the Internet Exchange in Vancouver, and there we'd peer with, Hurricane Electric or whoever. Yes.
So my internet or my email address is telus.net. Would that have to change?
Yes. So you would have to sign up for Gmail or something else for email. And I would not recommend that this venture be responsible for any emails or anything like that. It's too much of a hassle, which is why nobody does it anymore. So they only support the legacy things, but running an email service is too much work for the ISPs really. So they really don't want to do it. It's better to use one of the cloud providers to do that. So Yahoo or Microsoft or Google.
One quick question, do you have a rough cost per share at this point? Like, could we all buy in at say $500?
Yeah, whatever it costs to build a network.
Yeah, so like what I'm thinking is that, like we might start off with 50 people, but it could go to 150 houses.
Yeah.
It could go to 100 in no time, right? So, but we could set some value on the shares.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so what I propose is that we get a couple of people together.
Yeah.
We form a working group or committee, that committee explores the options
Right.
and sort of gauges interest from the island. Based on that, then we'll make a recommendation for which route to take.
Right.
How, and we'll know how many houses we have to sign up to basically pay for the thing, and we'll have to know how much time it will take to basically recover our costs. And that I don't know exactly. I gave you some rough costs for digging up the streets. That is obviously expensive.
Mhm.
Realistically, the only way that is affordable is if BC Hydro were to want to put their power stuff in the ground too. And the only way to do that is to convince them that the maintenance that they're doing every time there's a storm is too expensive. So that's a bigger project.
How was the
Just
existing
across this
cable
road,
run?
down the road to go that route, that's where probably want to start.
Yeah.
That's my take, you should start with Wi-Fi, pole mounted or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like line of sight stuff, if we started with that and upgrades.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just saying, like, so when they ran their cable over and that, the new cable, they never brought in anything for extra pulling of anything lines or nothing like that.
There is, as far as I know, not a single fiber pair running from the island.
And the Shaw cable and everything was run always from a satellite?
Yeah, well, it's
There was
not
never a
solid, but
cable.
yes, wirelessly.
There was never a cable that was run over.
For running a cable, I mean, is there any thought into like crossing to Newcastle or say Cookson and then across, or is that not?
So we could do that, but we run into the same problem on the other side.
Trenching.
The trenching in the city is the trick. Again, trenching in the city, we're talking probably $500 a meter. So yeah, it gets pricey, and if you need to cover it and have like police officers standing by, well, it's yeah.
So there's a major hub one in Vancouver, or can you actually just bring internet all the way from the States? Why don't they drag a cable all the way through the?
Still getting involved.
People do that, but they're
Big coils.
not to say you don't do that unless you have at least 50,000 people to share. So yeah, but Greenland, Iceland, they all did exactly that thing because they needed internet. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I asked it, but would there be like a monthly rental cost kind of thing?
There would be, we'd have to set up a monthly fee to cover upstream costs. I suspect, and the end of all this, I suspect the cost that we'd be paying for a link for the whole island upstream would be about $1,000 a month. So you'd have to spread that among however many people we got. So if we got 100 households, the total operating cost would be about $10 a month. Or that is the actual cost of sending the internet, bits and bytes onto the bigger network of the world. So yeah, I suspect that the fiber leads to an internet exchange plus the peering cost with the tier 1 providers would be about $1,000 a month.
Pays for itself in 3
Yes.
Should where we put.
Yeah.
Underground, do we have to get a permit for that? Because
Yes.
that's the city, we can't just go and.
Yes, so that would basically get the same permit that any utility gets. You have to get like right away, there's a bunch of rules.
Yes.
Yeah, thankfully Don is fully certified. If we ever choose to go down that route, he's allowed to do that if he's got the insurance and everything else.
Is that something that you approach the city with already and ask them if that's possible? Because we don't want to just do all this and then know that we can't go.
We have to do all the paperwork, and that's sort of if we form a committee and the committee says that's the best option, that would be part of the work, is to get all the permitting done with the city. But yes, absolutely. And then you need to put it on all the charts and everything else.
So does the Harbor Commission not have wireless like there? Or
But they do. No, yeah,
and you couldn't set up a system there, in underneath the dock, go up into their unit?
So there's wireless in all of the Nanaimo harbor area for all the people in the acts and the boats and everything else. It is not great for our use case. First of all, because they're very low. They're not like high enough, they're not at a vantage point. And secondly, they're sharing it among so many people, there's so little bandwidth per device that we'd have to deploy our own infrastructure on that side anyways. And there's a sort of a weird thing about wireless signals. People think of them as like laser beams, but they're not. They actually have something called Fresnel zones. So they start very narrow, and then you can think of the beam expanding in sort of an elliptical way. So, and then it becomes very narrow. So really it's the biggest beam width is in the center of the thing. And if that drops into the water, then you're in real trouble. Because then you start getting reflections and all sorts of stuff. So having something all the way down by the water is the worst possible scenario. So you have to kind of raise it a little bit off the water. Thankfully, the higher the frequency, the less it's the less or smaller the zone is. And I'm running this stuff at a very high frequency. I'm running at 60 gigahertz. For comparison, the highest mobile phone is like 5 gigahertz. So
What kind of radiation are you getting?
Thankfully,
The squirrel's gonna start turning lights.
even though the frequency is very high. And thankfully, 60 gigahertz just doesn't really do anything. It gets caught by basically leaves or anything, so it just gets scattered immediately. So it has almost no impact on any sort of life form. Like it doesn't even go through leaves if they're wet. That's the kind of
What about rain or snow?
it is affected, so you have to account for it. So you have to build in enough power to be able to handle the drop. But I don't remember the exact. I think it has for the current leaks that I have. I think the rain has to go above 50 millimeters an hour.
That's a lot.
Giraffes and elephants.
So yeah, yes.
My understanding was when they put the sewer and water paper back in the day, they tore up the phone line. And they replaced that with a fiber optic cable from town to the island. And then the restrictions always being the copper lines around the island.
So they might actually fiber onto.
That they brought the fiber to the island.
Oh.
Is my understanding. That's ancient history.
Yeah, but that might still be usable. Yeah, because if there is fiber to the island, then as we can do the same thing as those ISPs, we can force them to basically use us a pair of fibers. So if that is the case, then yes, that might be a very good option for us.
Or can you put your system there on the fiber to this end? What's in town now?
We'd have to know where it terminates in town. I'm guessing probably at the Telus building. So, but we could totally lease that fiber from Telus. And then use that for our uplink. Yes, if that is the case, then absolutely that would be useful. And that would save us any cost of doing a submarine cable over to Gabriela, which would be very nice.
Yeah, I think there's one. Came to
It's a really scary feeling that we're talking in secret and the big companies, if they found out we're talking about all this, but that is something, right?
No, they're nothing. This is part of and if they want to, if this encourages them to come and put fiber to our island, right? Fantastic. Like, that's great. Like, if they really want to come and service us, that I'm 100% behind them, and I will help them do that. So yeah.
So it sounds like you're doing all of this and putting this in under your own pocket. So first of all, thank you for that.
Yeah.
My question is, this is just going back to Shaw for a minute, because I know every time I call up, there's an issue. They're always saying, okay, once your router box goes, we don't have any more, you're not gonna be able to get it, right? So eventually everybody's routers are gonna go to those boxes.
Yeah.
So I find talking to everybody's paying different amounts per month. Why? And I keep saying to them, we are supposed to be getting the same, like what you're charging in the NIMO, we should be getting the same thing. No, you're not. Even though they'll call you and say, oh, we can upgrade you this, and you're not getting it. But so for one, I think all of us that are on Shaw, why aren't we complaining more about how come you're charging? You don't have to say the name because I'm not paying too much because I've been in many arguments with them, and saying, why are my neighbors paying this and we're all getting the same thing, and yet we're all getting different amounts.
If you want to lower your bill, call them and tell them to cancel. But they have to believe that you're canceling, then you ask them to be moved to transfer to retentions. The retentions is a special group of people who can make you deals. And then they can make you whatever deal. They have ceiling, and then they have a bottom, and they can make you a deal in that range depending on how many other services you have with them and how likely they think it is that you're going to pay. But it's just like airline tickets. It's revenue optimization. They will charge you as much as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And the only way,
Yeah, and then they just say, good.
yeah, and the only way you can actually get them to change it is to find the.
But it's prone to price creep, so
Oh, yeah.
you're gonna be playing the same game for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Every couple of years you have to call them and say,
Yeah.
this is garbage. I've sometimes wondered why there isn't a business service that does it for you. Yeah. Calls all your things and
the other thing, just to mention, sorry, is yeah, I seem to remember before I was here years ago, when we got the water on the island, everybody paid a little bit on their taxes to pay for that. Is that true? Is that true?
Yeah.
So is it something that maybe we could do again with fiber optics to the island and say, okay, we're willing to pay a little bit more on our taxes?
If the city's willing to do it.
Yeah,
the
that's
city
what I
would
mean,
have
but
to, the city would have to own the infrastructure. Somebody.
And they don't want to.
Actually,
Can we put it down?
the city of Nanaimo actually owns a lot of fiber. Because they connect all of their buildings in town with their own fiber.
Yeah.
So they do put their own fiber down into their streets to connect all their infrastructure. Yes.
I think that's the kind of committee with its.
Yeah.
You actually, due to their own Imagine Nanaimo and connectivity,
Yeah.
being a neighborhood of the city, they do have a responsibility. And so they may actually pay for the fiber where they can deal with the rest. Or if you do that local improvement tax thing, then I would think the city would want to do all the work as well and
Probably.
do it. And then it might actually get more expensive. But it's definitely something the steering committee should talk about it.
Question I have is I've got Shaw cable at my house, but we have Rogers cell phone. And since they are owned by the same company, we get our cell phones for like $10 a month. That's because we have cable. So if we switch to your internet, we don't have like cable vision, we have internet. So if we switch to your internet, that would kill our deal on our cell phones.
Yes, but then what you do is you talk to retentions and they will make you the same deal. They will almost certainly give you the same deal on the cell phones to avoid losing it. As long as you're not bound into a contract or something, then you have the flexibility to negotiate that. And really the 90% of the cost they incur is when they connect you and they set everything up, whether it's provisioning the SIM cards or putting the fiber into your house. So they will do a lot to keep you just to minimize the revenue loss that they will occur when you leave. So yeah, I would say talk to retentions and have them make you the same or better deal. Any other questions? Anything from Celine?
No chat, nothing from the chat. All right.
To Valerie's place down the cul-de-sac, in 300 to 500 yards. What would it cost to go Wi-Fi to Valerie's house and then she's line of sight from her place to?
So you can get outdoor wireless equipment that you can just use like regular Wi-Fi. The links that I have to town, you can't just use like a regular Wi-Fi, like a phone or laptop to use those things. If you want to do the regular Wi-Fi, outdoor Wi-Fi, the access points are $200 to $2,000, depending on how much power and how advanced they're supposed to be. We could probably make do with the $200 ones, and they reach about 100 meters. But any blockages, any house, anything in between, any trees, anything else affects it. So, and the other thing, if you keep on growing that network, it becomes like an ad hoc mesh network, and it becomes extremely hard to manage and predict how it works. So it would be much better if we could actually do per power pole or something where you know in a predictable way how it'll work. Because nobody wants internet that cuts out. And
I guess I wonder if it could be like a startup phase. Or
where we
whatever.
do that kind of
I
thing.
mean, there's different neighbors that have bi-site
Oh, they can
Side of
totally,
line.
yeah,
developers and have a repeating station or whatever.
you can do that. It just, then you need to think about, redundant power. So you need to have it on a UPS for the backup power. And then you need to, so it becomes kind of a hard to manage if you do it that way. Yeah, that's just me speaking from experience of doing this for 25 years. Yeah, it's better if you can do some structure.
So what do you see as the interim when you start this up? What do you see as like at the first pass?
First path is if you have direct line of sight, 100%. Second path is if somebody's not got direct line of sight, but their next door neighbor, they want to, cut a deal. Like I will tell you exactly which two things you need to do that, make that work. But you can't run. You can't have the organization run that. It can only run the direct links. And then I would suggest that whoever is interested in joining a steering committee or a group to get together and make a plan and figure out all the options, please email me or contact me, call me, however you want to. And we can create a group of individuals that can figure this out and figure out the next steps. And then I guess there would be another presentation as soon as we have all the money, all the numbers nailed down and everything else. But yeah, gut feeling on the power pulse, $100 for the licenses, another 300 per pole at least, and maybe let's say $500 per pole. And if you want to do 100 pulls, that's the cost of just doing the Wi-Fi route, but you're covering the whole island. So I don't know if that's too much for people or if that's the kind of, we need to figure out these numbers or figure out if there's another plan. But if you take something like, right now, I'm guessing between all of us, we have 200 internet connections at an average rate of $80 a month. That, very fast that gets up there in the in those numbers. Even trenching, let's say we go for the best possible, like trench everything, do everything, and get a fiber over to get real. I'm guessing that would be about $2 million. And even if you start doing the math on that on utility timelines, 5 to 10 years, it's not that much. It's more the initial cost that's prohibitive.
You need to organize financing or something.
Exactly. But the nice thing is there's an organization, like the company already exists. It's technically a for-profit right now. So if that turns out to be the best option, then there is a way to actually go and just have signed contracts from 100, 200 people for 5 years and go to a finance institution and do that. If that turns out to be the case, which I don't think it'll be, but just saying just in case.
All right, last question.
200 people on the island at an average of $80 a month.
Yeah.
That's $16,000 a month.
Exactly.
Like this system seems very doable.
And you then you do the math on that over like 5 years, and you're already into the millions. So.
That's why the Shaw building is really pretty and it's all.
All right, thank you, Antonia. That was great.